Some games are so well designed that they enable the player to intuitively figure out how to play, where to go, and what to do without ever having to be explicitly told. Some popular examples of this excellent approach to game design include Super Mario Bros., Portal, and Uncharted. Today, I want to include another game in this category of beautifully crafted games, 2013's Journey, developed by thatgamecompany. Hi, I'm Shane and welcome to Game Dev Academy. In this new series of videos, I'll be taking an analytical look at the design of video games in the hope of identifying both good and bad examples of the craft of game design. For this first video, I want to share with you how Journey tells you where to go and what to do without using any dialogue or on-screen text. Let's start with the first thing you learn about the game, its name, Journey. Journey is of course a noun, but it's also a verb. And according to oxforddictionaries.com, the definition of journey as a verb is to travel somewhere. And this is exactly what the game wants you to do. So before you've even gotten as far as installing the game, you've already been told what you'll be doing throughout your entire playtime. You must journey to a destination. But what is the destination? Well, this is also heavily hinted at before you even start playing the game, with almost every piece of promotional artwork depicting a glowing light atop a distant mountain. But just in case you're still not sure which direction you'll need to venture once you're in the game, the opening 3 minutes of the game makes this very clear. Once you begin your journey, the first thing you'll see is an opening cutscene, which introduces you to the sandy wilderness that the first portion of the game takes place in. As part of this opening sequence, you're shown these objects sticking out of the sand, something that will be used moments later to guide you on your way. You're then introduced to the traveller you'll be inhabiting, and the game gives you the first of only a handful of on-screen button prompts. You're told to try the right analog stick, but not what it does. You'll have to discover this for yourself. What this does is nothing groundbreaking, it allows you to look around. But it's upon taking this first look around the environment that the laser focus of the level design begins to lead you in the right direction. As you look around, there is nothing to see but sand dunes. Everything looks the same with no distinguishing landmarks to focus your attention. Apart from in this direction, where there are 3 objects placed right on top of a tall sand dune. Although there is no variation in colour or lighting to make this stand out, the developer ensures that you notice this by making the thin straight lines of the shapes contrast with the sweeping curves of the desert, and by adding moving material blowing in the wind. This is also the same landmark that you were shown moments ago in the new game screen. So instinctively, the player is drawn to this landmark, guided by the on-screen prompt encouraging the use of the left analog stick for movement. As the player reaches the top of the dune, the angle of the camera shifts to ensure that the player is looking directly at the light emanating from the distant mountain. The title of the game also appears on screen. The message to the player could not be clearer. Journey to the mountain. In the space of just 2 or 3 minutes, the player has expertly been given a short-term objective, get to the top of the sand dune, and a long-term one, get to the top of the mountain. All without using any voiceover, on-screen text, arrows, quest markers, or paths on the ground. This kind of really efficient design continues throughout the game. Let's take a look at the next example then. Once the title disappears, you're now at the top of a sand dune, looking for the next short-term objective. Looking around from this vantage point, the lack of clutter in the level design continues to guide the player. The rolling sand dunes are only broken up when looking straight ahead, where the structures sticking out of the sand guide the player's gaze to the glowing light ahead. This leans on a pretty standard convention in games that glowing things are important, and suggests to the player that this is the next objective. So the walk across the sand to the light begins, and this is where some more clever design reveals itself. This is very likely the first time that the player has ventured down one of the sand dunes, and so it's also the first time that the sand surfing mechanic is used. It doesn't do much here, other than to get the player to the objective faster. But what it is really doing is teaching the player about this method of traversing the world, which means it won't be unfamiliar to the player when the mechanic takes centre stage in longer sand surfing sections later in the game. Let's take a closer look at this next objective. As the player moves closer to the light, it becomes clear that it is placed on top of a structure which really contrasts against the shapes of the desert, and the designers also make more effective use of motion by placing some fragments of material fluttering around the object. At this stage, there'll be no doubt in the player's mind that this is the place to go. And it is. On top of the structure, the player will see for the first time a glowing symbol. It does not threaten the player in any way, and again leans into well-defined gaming conventions to indicate that this is some kind of positive collectible. As this is the first time that the player will have seen one of these, the designers make a really big deal of spelling out exactly what happens when they're collected. Control of the camera is taken from the player to ensure they see the following cutscene from the best possible angle. The energy engulfs the player and a scarf appears, its presence highlighted through the use of motion as it blows in the wind. Now it's time to learn about the flying mechanic and how it is charged up. Upon stepping onto the platform, the 4 scarf fragments flutter around the player character. The transfer of energy from them to the player is emphasised by the use of another glow effect and a rather pleasant sound effect. The player will no doubt notice that their newly acquired scarf continues to glow. Here's where we get the only other button prompt in the game. Through giving this newly introduced button a try, the player will see their avatar begin to fly, with the action being emphasised through the animation and the further use of the glow effect. Now the player is given some time and space to experiment with this new mechanic. They'll realise quickly that they are only able to fly for a limited amount of time, and that the scarf stops glowing after flying. The implication of this being that a glowing scarf indicates that the flying ability is charged and ready for use. They'll also discover that they can recharge the ability using the scarf fragments whenever they wish. In this small section, the player has learned what the glowing symbols do, how to charge the fly ability, how to use the fly ability, and that the ability to fly is finite and needs to be recharged. Again, all of this has been done wordlessly and intuitively. Building on this same method, the game also uses the scarf to indicate when the flying ability has been upgraded. Each time a power-up is collected, the scarf grows in length. This is made very noticeable due to the constant movement of the scarf and the fact that the developer has ensured that the whole scarf is always visible to the player. The player will notice that more of the small scarf fragments are now needed to charge the flying ability, and so it makes sense that the player is now also able to fly for longer. We'll leave the in-depth analysis there, and now we'll look at some other examples of Journey's clever design. We'll start with this whole section here, which makes use of a deep blue colour palette, as well as introducing these new material-based creatures that look suspiciously like jellyfish. All of this evokes the feeling of being underwater, and coming into contact with all of the scarf-based life forms means that the player is able to keep their flying ability charged. This leads to this part of the game feeling like a swimming section, which subconsciously tells the player where they need to go. They need to move up, as if to find the surface of the water and escape the murky depths. There is also this use of audio and visuals to communicate to the player that they cannot go this way. Whenever the player goes in the wrong direction, this is how the designers encourage them to try another path. No need for invisible barriers here, just the knowledge that the wind will keep blowing the player back will ensure that they stick to the critical path. This view here tells the player that they need to find a way to the other side, but the bridge is clearly broken. By following the same kinds of hints that they've already been trained to look out for, the player will release all of these fragments which create part of the bridge. Again, the camera makes sure that the player doesn't miss this reveal. The message to the player now is keep doing that until the rest of the bridge appears. I could go on, and there are lots of other instances that I haven't included in this analysis. Have a look for yourself and look for other examples of the game telling the player where they need to go and what they need to do, and tell me what you find by leaving me a comment. Here are some questions to get you started though. How do the players know how to deal with the Guardians? How does the game communicate the consequences of being successfully attacked by a Guardian? How are the negative effects of the extreme cold demonstrated through the mechanics of the game? And how does the game teach you how to play when a companion appears? Thanks for watching. This is a totally new kind of video for me and for the channel, so please let me know what you thought of it by leaving a comment down below, or come and join us on Discord. Should I make more of these? What other games or elements of game design would you like to see covered? For those of you just finding my channel, this is Game Dev Academy, where we cover all aspects of making video games, from design to using game engines and even creating your own 3D models. If you want to get into game development, then please subscribe and watch a few more videos. Game Dev Academy is supported by my amazing school governors over on Patreon, and the support of these fantastic people means that I don't need to charge for my content using platforms such as Udemy, and can instead make my tutorials and videos available to everyone. I'll leave the Patreon link below if you want to take a look.